So there we go. All right. Good evening. Welcome to this January 6th session of the Grand Lodge webinar series. Tonight we'll be talking about building a better beehive for the treasurer. Oops. I hit the wrong button. I'll have to remove that from editing later. As we talked about before, this is not a tiled meeting, so please be courteous on how we proceed. The sessions are being recorded. Please keep yourself on mute during the presentation. If you do need to unmute temporarily, you can use the space bar. Please use any for questions. Please send them through the chat feature. We will be opening up the polls at the end, about 5 minutes towards the end to do the polling. Upcoming schedule, we've got a couple more sessions of the Building a Better Beehive before we wrap up with that series. Then we have Most Worship Brother Terry Tilton will be talking to us about Masonic Research Society and the Philalethes, along with another conversation about safe lodges, lodge meetings with the COVID stuff going on. We are still running the Show and Tell Challenge through the Grand Lodge. This is an opportunity to get receive a plaque during the next annual communication. Hopefully we'll be able to all gather. Please see the website for more details on that. And with that, we now have presentation from Right Worship Brother Frank and Worship Brother Kay on the treasurer's Building a Better Beehive. I'm assuming you guys need the share capability. Is that correct?
Yeah. So if you give that to me, I'll kind of.
All right. I'm going to make you co-host, and you should be able to share.
All right. Okay. Good evening, brothers. This is our session on the treasurer for the lodge. So Worship Brother Kay and I will be going through some of these slides. This is maybe a little different than some of the other presentations because Kay and I are going to be highlighting different things about the treasurer, different aspects, and hopefully providing you with some stories that will reinforce the ideas that we're talking about in this presentation. So, Kay, why don't you start it off with this first one?
Okay, brothers. I'm Kay Moss, past master Tussler, 263, sitting treasurer of Tussler. Okay, Right Worshipful Brother Frank has put a lot of hard work into this for this. So when he starts speaking, I'll try not to interrupt him too much, but I'd like to draw your attention to this wheel that they've been talking about the whole series with the truth, tolerance around the outside, and the center being the lodge brother. If you notice, I wasn't aware of this till we talked about this. Frank put a lot of thought into this. If you notice, the master's at 12 high pretty much, so it's set up kind of like a lodge. If you'll notice, the Leo's to the left as the master's facing to the west, the senior warden's about 6 o'clock facing west, and the treasurer's to the left, and the secretary's to the right under their titles. And then you'll see the junior deacon to the right of the senior warden. So that's kind of the significance of this wheel in this presentations of, that we're starting with all the duties of a lodge. So I'm going to turn it back to Frank now.
Oops. So then the treasurer, there's really not a lot of description about the treasurer. So in this description here, the items in the parentheses is really just the additional discussion that's provided when the treasurer is installed. So to receive all monies from the hands of the secretary, keep just and regular accounts of the same, and pay them out with the worshipful master's will and pleasure with the consent of the lodge. That's a lot of information without a whole lot of direction. So that's why I think we're going to go through some of the duties and things that might be best practices. So Kay mentioned that he's the treasurer at Tussler Summit, as well as being grand treasurer. I'm a treasurer for the for Minnesota chapter number 1, Royal Archmasons, past master of Newport Lodge 118, and past potentate for Osmond Shrine. So I'm familiar with, well, both Kay and I are really familiar with how it would be really good that you have a treasurer that kind of knows what they're doing. And so again, this is going to be best practices and some stories and things that might help you out. When we look at the treasurer's jewel, it's a set of crossed keys. And different lodges have different colors. Some are silver, some are gold. It's also depicted as having one silver and one gold. And I have read that that could be possibly symbolism of the sun and moon. The sun being gold, the moon being silver. And those two things also reference 2 of the 3 lesser lights that we're familiar with. And so when we think about the treasure, the idea is that they should really exemplify the duty with equal regularity, just as the master runs his lodge. The treasurer should be running the accounts of the lodge with equal regularity. So a few fun facts before we get into some of this. I would imagine that most people are familiar with the phrase keys to the kingdom. So obviously the treasurer has the keys to the vault. And so when you have keys to the vault, you really own the kingdom. So the key tends to be a symbol of power. It represents power over wealth, being able to lock it up or unlock it for various uses. And to extend the idea, it also represents the power to admit or exclude. So the treasurer's jewel, that reminds us that we are the guardians and conservators of the lodge, and of our responsibility to guard well the doors against the unworthy and impious. So it's more than just the accounts of the lodge. The treasurer is an officer, and they should be looking at the welfare of the lodge as part of that overall duty that they are performing for the lodge. Keys have been used to symbolize man's ability to gain access for hundreds, thousands of years. And the key is an object symbolic of opening and closing, such as opening the door between this world and the next. And I want to say that the 2 keys also symbolize balance, in that when you're in charge of all the accounts, you need to make sure that you have the right amount coming in and the right amount going out. So to me, that's making sure that you're taking care of both sides, that there's a balance within the lodge. Kay, anything to add on some of this stuff?
Yes, we were talking about the balance of power, kind of, and it hasn't been proven, but if you've noticed in most concordant and appendant bodies in masonry that we're a lot of us members of, that when they do elections, even though it's not thought to be really powerful or the main figure, in modern day society now in masonry, the secretary is probably the more prevalent one. But you notice in the ritual form in elections and the way you install, the treasurer is elected, nominated and elected and installed in most bodies and concordant bodies before the secretary, perhaps thinking there's not a lot of proof of that back in the day when records maybe were kept on pampas or stones collected or colored or something, but they always had to worry about money, colored gold or colored rocks, or they had to pay for things. So in masonry, if they had to do money, that guy was pretty significant. So he should have been pretty trustworthy, or, the caveman mentality, they'll take care of the situation. So yes, that's what I'll touch on that.
All right. So now we'll start going into the duties of the treasurer, and we'll just kind of go back and forth on some of this. Now, again, the installation instructions and the part from the ritual don't really serve us very well in providing good directions for what the treasurer should be doing. But it's always a good practice for the lodge to have a budget. And certainly the treasurer is a key member of that budget team. They should be there to assist the senior warden in developing the budget for the coming year, as well as assisting the committee people that run different fundraisers, the pancake breakfast or spaghetti dinner. How did they do before? What kind of expenses can you expect? What sort of profits are you expecting? So the treasurer should be the person that can provide some of that guidance, both on preparing the lodge, getting the lodge ready for the future, but also being able to provide solid, really confirmation of how things have gone in the past, rather than somebody saying, "Oh yeah, I think we had 1,000 people at that pancake breakfast." Well, it's more like 100, and we only made $50. So those are the things that we really need to be seeing in the treasurer in his position, being able to provide that guidance and information. This last item is something that, again, there's really no particular information about this, but the treasurer should be working with all of the institutions that the lodge deals with, and ensuring that there are signatures and current signatures on there. Minimum 2, ideally 3. So if your lodge has, like Kay has, Tussler has trustees, trustee could be that additional person. It could be it should be the secretary and the treasurer, but someone else on there as well. I would want to add again, when you go to those institutions, find out who is actually on the records. Perfect example with Minnesota chapter number 1. In taking over the books, we had 2 different CDs at the same institution, but no one could recall who had signed on the documents. And the banks are in a tough position because they can't give you all of the information, especially if that person is dead. I mean, you have to prove it. So I was able to go to the bank and say, this guy who signed up for these CDs has been dead for 10 years, because the CD had just been rolling and rolling and rolling, and no one ever paid attention to it. So he had been dead 10 years. So I had to provide information. I had to have additional forms from the chapter, minutes showing that I was the elected treasurer and I'm supposed to be taking care of the books. So they were able to work with me. The people at US Bank, and working with them, they understood, very helpful, but also came up to that roadblock and said, everybody that you've named so far is not on this account. So I said, well, and playing as best I could with them, saying, I need help because I just need some direction to know who it might have been. So I don't know that they should have done this, but they did. They gave me the initials of the person who was on the books for US Bank. I then, with the help of all of the members and going through the records of the chapter, were able to find out, oh, this guy was the treasurer. Here's his initials. He also died 7 years ago. I was then able to present that information. I gave them the proper name, and then was able to work with them. But I also had to fill out a whole series of documents with proving who I was, and that we're really trying to take care of all of our transactions. So this is not unusual, actually. So I've seen, as being a member of the Shrine, we have Shrine clubs and units where, again, someone who opened the account is dead many years ago. And some of the institutions are really being very hard-nosed about it. And they want, they won't do anything. They won't help you. They won't provide any assistance in trying to resolve it. And then you wind up having to go through some just huge tasks in order to prove who you are and that you do have access to the money. Like Kay, I know you had similar kind of instances.
I could tell you modern day now with the larger banks, I went through some things like this too. The best way in a Masonic society that I found out is if you got a certified set of minutes, what they call certified is usually you'd add, the secretary would add on the bottom of the sheet or something. You get the signatures and the heading of your lodge and the date of your minutes, but you get a signatures of all your principal officers, which would be your master and your wardens, and make sure the treasurer and secretary sign that, and a copy of your bylaws in most instances will help you with getting your books squared away. This happened before I was in office for that, but we had a treasurer die in office, and he funny thing, he had told the story that happened to him 20 years before that they had a secretary die. Well, he'd been divorced 20 some years, and he had like I'll keep this tighter, I guess, watching our time. He had like 10 automobiles, but when he died, his wife, that wasn't his wife, but she had been his divorce partner for over 20 years. She took the lodge keys, the checkbooks, and everything in till they got done with probate or whatever they had to do with the legalities. And that was kind of a touchy situation to try to have the officers or the master, and then we contacted Grand Lodge at the time. It's really touchy to say, hey, you guys have been legally divorced for 20 years or damn near 20 years. I don't know if you should be having our lodge checkbook and our keys and stuff, but it was kind of a sticky situation. We finally got it resolved, but that is a true story. We didn't have a divorced partner that had no legal rights, had our checkbook at that time. So, but that is a true story. Go ahead, Frank.
Yeah. I want to go back just a little bit on the idea of the budget. And I think this year, with as crazy as the kind of year that we've had, the budget is really important, because when the lodge passes a budget with the consent of the lodge, then the normal items that come due during the month, and especially this time when we weren't able to meet, the secretary and the treasurer could then pay out those regular bills without having to worry about presenting them to the lodge and going over those. So a budget is a really a useful item, even normally. So I would imagine most of the lodges do something like authorize the secretary and treasurer to pay the bills over the summer when the meetings are dark. So just doing it over the years is really a much better idea. Some other things is to maintain transparency at all times. Maintain the checking, savings, and investment accounts, and keep regular kind of the same, going back to our ritual work. But also creating and enforcing a financial policy of the lodge. One of the things that especially lodges that do have a considerable sum, creating some sort of financial policy. How do you handle the books? How do you handle transition when you have a new secretary or a new treasurer? If you have guidelines on donations. So for example, we have the scholarship fund with Grand Lodge matching. Some go beyond that, but trying to create a policy to say, okay, we'd like to donate, $300 to the Boy Scouts, but the last 5 years we've only donated 100, and our last pancake breakfast didn't do so good, so maybe we should just keep it at $100. So trying to keep that perspective for all the lodge members is really a great idea. And also have some sort of an investment strategy. Are you going to use CDs? Are you going to use, we used to have the Grand Lodge fund system, but that's no more. But it's easily duplicated with other banks, even back with Wells Fargo. So there's other ways to do it, but every member should know what it is that you have in different investment vehicles, and what are you doing to try and maximize that for the long term. So those are important aspects. Okay.
Yes, the normal, what I found out, just to use some little bit of facts and figures, some of the reason, I could be correct on this, but most of the reason Grand Lodge doesn't do our money is because most lodges, I'd say the majority of them in Minnesota, are less than $250,000 probably for funds. Well, larger corporations like US Bank, I know this for a fact, and Wells Fargo, they don't make enough money per se on us as a nonprofit fraternity to want to handle that kind of money. So that was some of the main reasons that Grand Lodge and the finance of Grand Lodge gave it back to the lodges. So then when you try to continue with the same policy, they'll go down to like 100,000 or 125 perhaps, but it's really hard to stick with a major corporation unless you go to a small, you just got to roll it over and invest it probably, but to go for a bank to have them invest your money is really tough because they want bigger figures with the way things operate, because of course they take a percentage out of there. Another interesting thing about that money, when it rolls over like that, they're always going to charge you a fee. So you want to be wary of that. But you don't want to move it a lot because it just confuses, and it kind of goofs up your transparency. The main thing is you want to be able to tell, like, I keep a running check. It's coded, of course, on my phone, so you can have a balance just in case something happens to me. And you just need transparency, so the members need to know if they want to. Sometimes they'll ask too many questions, and you should say, I'd probably save that for a tiled meeting. And that's what I'll go with that.
Yeah, and I think there's ways of doing it in small amounts. I know that Newport, my home lodge, we have our regular bank, but when we want to do money market accounts or CDs, the rates were really, pretty bad. It was, well, right now rates are really, really, really low. But our secretary, Steve Ingram, was able to find a bank that was able to give us an exceptional rate on a CD. So it's worthwhile to look around. And if you've had the same bank for a really, really long time, just make sure that they are providing you the services you need as you're going forward. Lodges do take a little bit of time to become modernized, but banking systems are there that can be really helpful for a modern lodge to be able to take advantage of those.
Frank, something that slipped my mind when I was off my notes here. One thing that's common, I found out is a common problem when moving money in your lodge as a nonprofit. We fall under the umbrella of Grand Lodge, but a lot of times, like, for example, if you go to US Bank or Wells Fargo, if you're not careful the way they do things these days, they set up your account as a personal account, like your own checking account or something. You have to be careful, because our lodge fell into that trap, and it took almost acts of Congress, like Frank went through, to get paperwork. And the best thing we had after doing my homework a little bit was certified, it's a term called certified minutes, and a copy of our bylaws that shows the officers have this power and the key word is nonprofit. And to get it you got to schedule. What I found out with US Bank, you have to schedule a commercial banker to speak to. Because if you go in and see a normal banker, the way these things are now, and this has been going on for a few years now, they used to have a commercial banker in every location, but now you need to schedule, especially now with COVID, but before COVID, you need to schedule to see a commercial banker that specializes in nonprofit monies, or you could fall in the trap of a personal account. And that could be issues. That's not good for, because your lodge basically should be ran like a business, a nonprofit business. Okay.
Yeah, and I think that's the kind of the overall aspect of the lodge. You know, even though that we are nonprofit, we still need to run as a business. We still need to run with a minimum break even, hopefully a surplus as we go through the years. There's a couple other ideas. You might want to maintain two different types of files. One is the permanent documents. So those might be the things that come from the bank with the initial opening papers. You can, it might come with the IRS papers that you have. Anything else that you want to be able to get to on a regular basis, but don't want to put it in an annual folder. So the monthly documents, so you could keep all of the monthly statements, the copies of the warrants and all of those kinds of things as a monthly document, but you still want to be able to get to those permanent documents easily, especially if you're going to be transferring banks and moving things back and forth. You also want to be able to present a statement of the finances of the lodge, not just when requested, but all the time. You want to be able to show that you are being the fiduciary for the lodge and being part of that. And then the consent of the lodge. Obviously, that's part of our ritual and our installation. And the idea of the consent of the lodge is, are they aware of what they're spending the money on? Sometimes even when you ask for it, you know, if somebody puts a motion up to spend something, they may not understand exactly what that is. So hopefully the treasurer can be that kind of person that provides that background or third-party information to say, this is what we're spending our money on. Are you okay with it? Kind of thing. And then lastly, you know, just other duties assigned by the master. Okay, what else you got?
Not a lot on that, other than what we went through in my experience with COVID this year. The treasurer was kind of in charge of, but the lodge gave me permission. We had shut down everything. I would have shut down the electricity if I could have, just to save costs, but we cut the garbage out. You know, because you have commercial rates. We cut our lawn service out. We had volunteers. We had volunteers to come do our lawn service. The entities, the air conditioners, you know, are turned down low, and we cut our cleaning service. We basically, you take it upon yourself as a member in these COVID times to try to watch your finances. The only thing that was kind of tough is, like, if you have a parking lot like ours or any size parking lot that needs to be plowed, you can't. I live 20 miles away from the lodge, 25 or 22. You got to have somebody plowing it. Unfortunately, it's tough to find a commercial plow company that will plow with Grand Lodge COVID restrictions. And then if you, like, we're Roseville Masonic Center, you have other renters and bodies there. You can't just have our nights as Tuesdays. You can't just have Tuesdays. You got to be able to have it open all the time, even with the restrictions, in case they have a right to get in that building. So that was one of the major expenses. And we're fortunate the guy we found, instead of be like cupboard, like the malls where you lose part of your parking lot, he pushes it in. We're on the edge of a waterway, but it's legal to push the snow up there because we're taxed with water drainage. But these are things that are mindful, other duties as assigned by the master, or you take on yourself. Okay, Frank.
So coming down to the home stretch here, who should serve as the treasurer? Certainly any member in good standing is a requirement. but hopefully someone that's familiar with finances, at least feels comfortable with it. One group that we were with, it was clear that he didn't feel comfortable with tackling and understanding the investments. That's probably not the best guy to have for your treasurer. You also want someone who's going to be in it for more than 1 year, but certainly not forever. You want someone who's going to be steady, going to provide some institutional knowledge, someone who understands what's going on, at least during their term as treasurer, and be able to access the records from before. But just as I was mentioning earlier, lodges and banking technology changes. So you want to have someone who is able to keep up with those kinds of changes. Certainly trustworthy and high integrity are absolutely integral to who the treasurer is. But lastly, I would add trust but verify. So even though he's the nicest guy and you've known him for years and really worthwhile, verify those documents. So when the annual report comes up and the annual audit, make sure you go through those documents. That is absolutely critical. And it's hard to believe it, but still to this day and age, there are people that are embezzling from any and all Masonic bodies. So just trust but verify. Make sure that you're on there. And if you don't see something, or if you see something that doesn't make sense, make sure you ask the question. A good, solid treasurer will be able to answer that for you and provide you proof. That's absolutely critical. Okay.
Yes, the trust and verify, like Frank's keywords, where it's got to be somebody that, if you don't know the answer, you should be able to say, I'll get you the answer and live up to your word. But no, normally you better have a ballpark figure, like how much it was. You may not know the cents or anything, but you may know the value or what purpose or the length of contracts. Believe it or not, that should be part of the guy handling the money. I guess it may not be part of it, but it happens to be, you're the one that takes care of the bills, because you got, like myself, I'm more anal about my lodge's money than my own checkbook. So I know more what's in the lodge's account than I do my own checkbook, but that's because I'm goofy like that. But anyway, that's how I'll close, Frank.
Okay. So we're coming to the end. Obviously, there are resources on the Grand Lodge website, the members portal, Grandview. I may be speaking to the choir, but the more that you can get onto Grandview, the better. You will have, there are a lot of really terrific resources there. So I would certainly recommend Grandview, but also the Grand Lodge website is really worthwhile. So that's it from us. We got one slide left. I certainly want to thank Kay. Kay and I have been working this treasure kind of gig for a few years now, kicking things around. So this was really a great opportunity to share with you some of the things that we've experienced. And we hope this has been a worthwhile session for you. So Kay, why don't you wrap it up with this last part?
On the slide that you got out there on the wheel?
Yeah.
Okay, there's probably a good reason, we're not patting anybody on the back, but why you'd want the treasure under this outer rim, that basically that's where the rubber meets the road, is the truth, and you can see the masters cut into that corner too, as his senior deacon. That's another presentation, but the senior deacon's the right-hand man of the master and the treasure, because truth, I mean, they're all good qualities of masonry and the fraternity, but there's a reason to probably put that under truth. because you surely wouldn't want it under charity. So you want the guy pretty clairvoyant about what he's doing there. That's how I'm wrapping up, Frank. We're open.
Yeah, and I think, charities, charity is our kind of our hallmark, and we want to be able to be part of that. So charity is also identified as one of the more key elements for the treasurer, but also the community, whether it's the involvement with the local bank, local community, working with them for different activities of the lodge. That the treasurer is right there. That should be that person. So with that, I believe that is the last slide that we have. And love to hear any questions that you guys would have.
Yes, have a question, have an item. Came on late, but did you have much discussion about the relationships with a banker during this program?
Not necessarily the relationship with a banker, but that the treasurer really needs to understand, kind of the banking operations.
Well, the reason I bring this up is that with Daylight Lodge, the treasurer died and he had personal accounts. And I became treasurer. And the bank people wouldn't even tell us what was in our checking account. They're really hard-nosed about this. And I was going back and forth to the local bank and talking to this person about it. And this person really didn't understand what I was talking about. Finally, this person said, trying to keep this gender neutral, said, there's somebody in our group here that belongs to an organization kind of like what you're talking about. And sure enough, it was a brother Mason. And the interesting thing is that after talking to him and kind of straightening things out, it all kind of pulled together. So my question, and I have brought this up before, is there a banker, a business banker that understands what our fraternity is all about that we can handle our banking through? Because with all the changes and such going on, it just seems to be such a problem that I don't know how we can get decent people to become a treasurer, just fighting with the bank to maintain our checking accounts. Now, does anybody have any other opinions on this?
Well, Frank, I would go back to the fact that you need multiple people on every account. There's no way around it. You need multiple people on the account. And that is the surefire way to ensure that you still have access and information about that account. And we did talk about this, earlier, that, Kay and I have had these issues, and it's really important to do it. But also, one of the things that I learned was, going to the banker and say, what information do you need? What can I do to help you help us? And they've been really useful. Certainly bringing copies of minutes, a corporate resolution. Some banks want, because it's a business account, they want a corporate resolution, which it really is just a statement saying that this person and this person have the authority to do these, 10 things related to finances. And it gets signed by someone who's not on that document. So if it's the secretary and treasurer, that gets signed by the master, puts the seal of the lodge. Some banks will require a notary for that. And if you have actually investments in some banks, you need medallion certificates and things like that. The more documentation you have of who's taking over and why they've taken over, the banks will start to then open up more. That's my experience.
Right.
I'd like to comment some more on that. Uh, because getting people on and off the account is, well, a pain in the posterior. And actually, the day-to-day accounting of a bank really doesn't involve a lot of money. And possibly there should be some way set up that the investments are handled by a different group than the treasurer of the lodge. I don't know if that came up or not, but the investments, that seems to be an entirely different field than what the treasurer does, which is generally the bean counting, but the investments is more long range stuff. So maybe the investment stuff ought to be separated from actually what the treasurer does. And then if we could find a banker that understands the ins and outs of people coming and going and knows where to verify the information that a treasurer is bringing up, i.e. through Grand Lodge, that it'd be a much smoother system.
I agree, Frank. I see there's another treasure on here of some big body. Dan, do you have anything to comment to any of this stuff?
No, I've had a couple of those problems with the bank accounts, and a funny one is we set it up with the banker, like you were saying, made our appointment. We all went to the meeting. All the officers were there, and they said, you need these papers. So it's like, well, we can't leave, get all these three guys back together again. It took us a month to get together. So we made the documents while we were there, and we were the president, vice president, and the treasurer. So we signed them all on the spot. And we made the documents as she wanted them. So if I have all your guys with you, it's easier to get it done.
That is a very crucial point, though. It's hard to get, we are a volunteer society and we meet in the evenings, and that was the key. Frank knows, we talked to the other Frank King, because he's from my lodge. We talked a lot about that. Frank was initial to help me set up with some of this stuff too. Frank knows about the deaths of losing a treasure, and I mean, more than that one that's happened to Frank's experience at least a couple times, I'm thinking 3 times that I know about. But the thing is, I found a commercial banker that she was willing to meet. I said, well, a lot of these guys work. She was willing to meet in our lodge. She came from Blaine, but I had to make an appointment because I struck out at the Roseville because that wasn't doing so well. So she was willing to meet in our lodge at Roseville at 5 p.m. long as we set up an appointment, because she would adjust her work schedule. But that was the importance of having a commercial banker. And she actually was one of the branch managers, but that was the importance of having a commercial banker versus a personal banker, because a personal banker won't meet you after 5, but the commercial banker made those arrangements for us. Fortunately, we dodged the bullet, but we was able to get that set up in case when we got her done.
The thing is about, if you get the investment part off with a stockbroker, they're so much easier to deal with than the bank, and and just leave the banking and bean counting to some outfit or some bank that understands what's going on with a fraternity. Well, sometimes I think it's worse being a treasurer than being a master.
I will second that. And Frank, we come from a lodge that we had a professional treasurer. He's the emeritus. So this is rookie work to him, but the rest of us are voluntary. But
can I offer a comment here? Can I offer a comment here as a treasurer for various Masonic bodies over the years, and also as a retired commercial banker? One of the things I would offer is, I know our experience has been, if you don't have a big portfolio that you're talking about, if you're talking about, $100,000, $200,000, I would recommend you try to make an arrangement with a community bank. It's in your community that takes the time to know their clients. Having worked for Wells Fargo for many years, frankly, those people come and go, and they couldn't care less, frankly, about your $100,000 to $200,000 business account like we have, especially, and they're under, and frankly, the big banks are under so much scrutiny with all the new rules that they have to follow, that things that they would have accepted years ago when you set up the account, if you make a change for it, you're going to have to go back and get articles of incorporation and other things that you may not even be able to find. So I would say, if you've got a community bank that people are comfortable with, and that people that they're engaged in the community, I think sometimes that's a better arrangement for a smaller someone that's got maybe $100,000, $200,000. If you're talking, 7-8 figure portfolio, that's a different issue. Then you get then you go to your stockbroker and other people. But my experience has been, we've had a lot better luck. In my lodge, the president of a local bank, a branch of a local bank, is a member of the lodge, and he makes sure, our accounts get well taken care of. We don't get charged for anything. Works out really well.
That helps. That's a big help.
That's the point I've been driving at. If you find a bank where the bankers understand what's going on. Several years ago, when I was treasurer of Tussler Summit, we had a terrible time with the bank, the local banker, all because my driver's license had been clipped in the corner because I was waiting for a new one to come. And this person really raised hell about, well, I couldn't make any changes and such. But the next day, I did get a hold of the manager of the bank, and we had this thing cleared up in about 10 minutes.
Right.
That's the point I'm driving at, is to get somebody who has an authority that,
Well,
or some means of straightening this stuff out.
I would add to the fact that, there aren't a lot of, Don's retired. There are not a lot of old bankers at the branches, my experience. And actually, I was trying to open up a checking account for a Shrine Club, and the commercial banker wasn't there at the time. They were expecting him any minute. So the personal banker started the process, but then she said, I can't go any further. So the commercial banker showed up. He was probably 19, seemed like. And I was actually helping him fill out his computer forms more than he was filling them out himself. He didn't understand anything.
Right.
That's a bingo again, Frank, the other Frank.
Yeah. So that's why I say, if you got someone who's got some background, it's really helpful and can be useful to them. Yeah. It was really a frustrating afternoon talking to this kid. Just, I don't like to be that way, but it's like, you're the commercial banker. You're supposed to know this. You're supposed to know more than me. How come I'm doing this for you?
Right.
Don, I have a question for you as a retired banker. I just took over for treasurer for Cornerstone up here in Fergus. Don't run away. They're asking me for articles of incorporation for our lodge.
Yep.
Is there such a document for our lodge, or is that our charter?
Well, it would probably be your charter.
I'd like to bring that up.
If it's the charter, we have the charters, that's fine, but articles of incorporation, and for this and the other bodies that I'm treasurer for now, they're asking for articles of incorporation, which don't exist.
Usually
that's the problem. That's part of the problem.
Right.
Because when you go deal with a Wells Fargo or a US Bank, they've got new rules that they're under, very strict new rules, and they don't, they're just following their checklist. And if you don't have exactly what they say, it's nearly impossible. So a lot of times if you go to a community bank that's really engaged in their community, you'll find better luck because they understand, they're more likely to understand the types of organizations. Another thought is, if you're looking for a bank, talk to the guys in the Lions Club or the Rotary or some of the other fraternal organizations, see where they bank. If you're looking for a bank, they'll have some recommendations because they have the same kinds of issues as we do.
A lot of times too, it's also the way you're headed or listed with the state. Like,
yep.
I found out technically we're not listed right, but that's another story. But if you got Grand Lodge, the biggest thing I said, we fall under the umbrella of the Grand Lodge, the 501c3, we fall under their umbrella. So if you have complaints like you're talking about, David, you take it up with my Grand Lodge, and I'd give them the address to the Grand Lodge, stick them on the Grand Lodge. Let Frank and Ryerson take care of that, but they're just picking on the lodge, but it's the heading that you're listed out of your state, and if you can prove, it's easy to prove paperwork that you fall under the umbrella of the Grand Lodge of Minnesota. That's a big stickler. Like,
Yeah, so if you have the charter and the bylaws and your previous bank statement, that goes a really long way.
Yeah, yeah.
And minutes that say this person has been duly elected and installed.
So it's not accessing the accounts. We already have access to the accounts. I have all that. We're looking to create a new account.
Sure.
And because we have an account, they just won't create another one underneath that account because we want to isolate some dues coming in and that kind of stuff. We actually have to go through the full account creation.
Who's the bank?
So, Bell Bank.
Hmm.
We've been banking with them for 20 years.
are you talking to the manager of the branch also, David, too? I mean,
Yes.
okay.
Well, we had the same issue at the Scottish Rite, where we wanted to open a new account at Wells Fargo, and they wanted documents that, just didn't exist, even though we'd been banking there for decades and decades and decades.
All right.
Actually,
Well,
it's quite easy to get somebody off the bank account on a commercial one because it's like a corporation. Because if you fire somebody or they got to go, your name comes off. It's getting a person on the account that's tough, but getting them off a corporate's usually a lot easier than putting somebody on. That's the
Now,
problem.
I found it the other way around with US Bank. They said I could, since I was the lead person, I could add anyone I wanted, but I couldn't take anybody off.
That's under
Unless I had all the paperwork.
See, that's
May
I
I,
went in with the
may I add
lodge
one thing?
minutes and it was done.
Go ahead, Ralph.
Yeah, what I wanted to add is something that you were alluding to, but nobody's answered. And that is that we are incorporated under the statutes as part of the Grand Lodge. And if you need those statutes, they're right at the beginning. They're chapter 1 of your code.
Yep.
The Articles of Incorporation for the
Yep.
Grand Lodge, chapter 1 of your code. And we are
Good.
incorporated by them and their charters.
That's a good point, because
Yeah,
I
the
did some
tax
inquiry
exempts-
with the state about the incorporation thing, and the reply and back was essentially, "Why are you bothering us about your lodge?"
The
thing?"
tax exempt status of the Grand Lodge is not 501c3. I believe it's 501c10, which is lodge-related fraternities, not
I did say 3, it's 10, yeah.
Yeah.
10.
Good
Charities
point.
is 3, but the lodge is 10.
Right.
That's
I
correct.
said the wrong number. That's correct.
Yep. Yeah, here's a letter. 501c10.
Yep.
Tax
3
exempt.
is the charities.
Yeah.
But the best thing is, if you think you've got enough documents, and you go to the bank, you don't. Bring more.
Good point.
Bring more.
But why all this bother?
Trying to keep the books right, I think.
Well, Don's, I've been following this as I go through different organizations, and I see, okay, something happened, and then it gets, a new federal rule shows up, and then, well, that was okay before, but now you have to have this. And so and again, trying to find the right person can be difficult to do. So, it's that, so when I mentioned earlier about the permanent file, that's the permanent file is the great place to put all those documents. So put a copy of the Articles of Incorporation for Grand Lodge, put your bylaws in there, some of your the permanent documents, so that you can just grab that file, go to the bank and say, here it is.
Hopefully they don't come back and say, "What am I supposed to do with all this stuff?"
Well, just bring it along, because they're going to keep asking, and you can just
Right.
pull it out and say, here you go. Here you go. So we're up to an hour, almost an hour.
Yes.
Yeah, we
So-
have this, coming up here.
I'll say thank you to
We
everyone.
have just to wrap this up as we're wrapping up here. Thank you, brothers, for the presentation. It was well done, and all the questions and conversation. As a reminder, the upcoming schedule for the webinar sessions. We have junior and senior warden, worshipful master with the grandmaster coming, and most worshipful brother Terry coming and doing some presentation on Masonic research societies. These are recorded, as we've said before. You can find them on the recorded sessions on the Grand Lodge website. This one should get published here shortly, as soon as the Right Worshipful is able to get up there and publish those. With that, the poll was done, and I thank you for everyone for submitting it. I will stop the recording now.